Welcome to Rising Stronger Radio, where we explore mental health from a more holistic perspective to empower you to break free from symptoms like anxiety, depression, fatigue, lack of motivation, and addictive behaviors, and instead create an environment both inside and out that is more conducive to healing, vitality, and living a purposeful life. We focus on topics like the power of nutrition, movement, and other lifestyle habits, how to navigate the toxicity and pitfalls of the modern world, as well as philosophical, spiritual, and religious concepts to help you bring out the best in yourself and find your place and purpose in creation. My name is Keith. I'm a holistic health coach and independent mental health researcher. I'm also someone who has faced significant struggles with anxiety, depression, addiction, and other chronic health issues. If you haven't already, you can head over to my website, risingstronger.com, and download my free high mileage foods for mental health guide. I also offer a free 30-minute breakthrough chat if you're interested in personalized guidance and dialing in your nutrition and lifestyle habits to support energy, clarity, and happiness. With that said, let's get into today's episode. All right, welcome back to Rising Stronger Radio. This is Keith, your host, and in this episode 6, I believe, we're going to talk about different strategies, ideas, practices, habits to help fix and optimize your sleep. And this is very much something that I can share, this information from my own experience. Growing up, I struggled a lot with sleep. There was a point where I had to do a sleep study in a hospital with electrodes all over me. And just in general, sleep was something that was very anxiety producing. I had trouble falling asleep, most nights. That was really the biggest thing, was the inability to fall asleep, kind of having mild insomnia, you could say, but also not always the best quality sleep, waking up throughout the night and just not feeling rested from sleep. And this carried over into, my teenage and young adult years. And it's really something that I'd say over the years I've learned how to optimize my sleep. And it's, to me, it's a really valuable thing to understand, because at this point in my life, it's not that I'll never get a bad night's sleep or, whatever, but I kind of understand now how to set myself up for good sleep. And most every night, even with we have a young son, my wife and I, almost 2, but even with our young son, still really getting quality or enough quality sleep that even when the quantity is not quite there, that, I still feel rested and can function, at least close to optimally. But I think it's a really important knowledge to have, because there's nothing more frustrating than not being able to sleep or having sleep trouble and not knowing why. And when you kind of know what goes into good sleep and how to tailor your environment and, day and your habits around, bedtime for good sleep, there's something like comforting about that, about knowing like how to do it, but also also being able to troubleshoot. So if you have nights where you're not sleeping well or things get off, that you know where to go back to correct it. And I like to say that if sleep came in capsule form, everybody would be taking the maximum dose. It's such a powerful healer of brain and body. It's really like it's one of the most important things that we do as human beings, because it allows us, or it's largely what allows us to function properly and optimally in our day. And one thing that I think is important that maybe in our modern world is the least understood, is that we have both quantity and quality of sleep. So I touched on this a minute ago for myself, but quantity is definitely very important. You don't want to, skimp on giving yourself enough time to sleep, but there's also the quality aspect. And I think a lot of people, even that give themselves enough time to sleep, may still not get quality sleep or feel rested because of some of these things that we're going to go over. But it's something to keep in mind, that it's not just about going to bed earlier, although that, for a lot of people is an important step, but it's also learning, what makes quality sleep. And I think it's also important to point out that learning how to sleep better naturally is super important. There may be times where, sleep just isn't happening, that there's a reason to take maybe a prescription sleep medication or like something, over the counter for sleep. But I think none of these are good long-term solutions. Most of them aren't even good short-term solutions unless you really, really, really need to just get to sleep. But a lot of people become dependent on them for one thing, which isn't even necessarily the main problem, but they have, a lot of side effects. A lot of them, people, you really don't even wind up getting very restful sleep. And there's a whole myriad of things that or issues that come along with it. So I think there's so much that we can do naturally, and this is another area where it feels like a theme throughout a lot of what I've been talking about, that a lot of the issues we face in the modern world are, first of all, bi-directional. Like, not getting good sleep is, impacts our mental health, will make us less resilient to stress, more anxious, more likely to be depressed. And then also the way that we live, when we're living lives where we aren't managing our stress or we're taking on too much, we're anxious because of the way that we're living, maybe because of what we're eating, because of what we're feeding our minds with. We're depressed because of, X, Y, and Z. These also feed back into affecting sleep too. So everything is bi-directional. But it's also that so many of the problems that we face that are common in the modern world, but let's say even here, sleep, depression, anxiety, excess stress, are the result of a lack of knowledge of how to properly live, in alignment, let's say, with nature. And I don't mean like going out in the woods and living, but just understanding that biologically we have needs that need to be met, and needs that have very much been pushed aside in the modern world. Most of how we see life, how we see ourselves, and how we live doesn't account for these things. And up front, that might appear to be appealing, like we get to do all this stuff, but we suffer on the back end. And then we kind of try to blame randomness for things and try to solve problems without actually solving the problems, which is largely what mainstream medicine does if you kind of peel it back. So what we're going to talk about here is how to really look at sleep in a proper way. And I will give you at the end a specific sleep routine. I'm going to kind of go throughout the day first. And perhaps the most important thing to take away from this is to understand that sleep often reflects our entire day, and even multiple days. In other words, it's not just like what happens right before we go to bed or what we do or getting in bed in time. Like, good sleep is reflecting that that our day and the way that we're living each day or that day is kind of lining up with how our body and brains need to be living. We're meeting our needs, so to speak. And that poor sleep is often the opposite. It often stems from the things that we're doing throughout the day that are winding up, that when we get to that time that it's time to go to sleep, our bodies and brains just aren't ready to do what they need to do, or aren't able to do what they need to do. So I'm going to highlight just a couple things of why sleep is so important. There's many, 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 many reasons, but if we are looking specifically at like mental health, sleep is very important for regulating mood and processing emotional information. So sleep plays a huge role in our ability to be emotionally resilient, to take on what comes at us throughout the day, and not only not welcome it, accept it, get through it, do what we need to do, but not be like taken out by it, not get to the point where when we do that too often, we literally just can't do it anymore because we're being drained and depleted and don't have the resources. How well we tolerate and respond to stress, kind of the same idea. Maintaining a healthy body weight, our immune function, fertility and reproductive health, our brain's ability to clean itself. This is, something that in mental health is still not really, a well understood thing in mainstream mental health. But, our brain very much goes through a cleansing process at night. And when we don't get good sleep and when we're not sleeping well consistently, like this gets backed up and very much affects our brain function, and is one of the reasons why, poor sleep has such an negative impact on mental health. But sleep also affects testosterone levels. It affects, if we're training, like our strength and our ability to recover. A lot of people don't think about this, but when we're working out, we go and work out as a form of stress to like cause a breakdown. And it's during rest, it's during sleep, it's during the periods that we're relaxing and getting ourselves into a rest and relax parasympathetic state that our body's actually able to recover and get stronger, add muscle, things like that. So sleep's just super important. There's so many reasons why it's worth focusing on, but let's get into the specifics now that now that we've painted a picture as to my opinion on why it's so important. So some of these I'm going to comment a little bit on. Some of them I may just read out if they're more obvious. But the first one, and we're going to start at the beginning of the day, and we'll get to, bedtime at the end. But the first one would be to wake up at the same time every day. And, that can be tough for people, especially if you're like the weekends or like party time and things like that, which I think is a whole nother aspect of, what can impact happiness. But waking up at the same time is if you understand circadian rhythms, what actually, the internal clock, the internal biological clock that governs so many processes in our body, it's largely dependent on our wake times. So waking up at the same time every day not only gives the body this predictability to, start and end and go through these different processes, but it also, kind of helps us to get into a routine, even from a practical sense. Like the predictability of these types of things can be very helpful for just our lifestyle and organizing, the way that we live. So it's a tough one for a lot of people, I know, but even on the weekend, waking up at the same time is very powerful. And I think that it's one of those things that precedes being more content with life, because it requires that we sort of even things out. We can't go in the weekend and just go all out and drain ourselves, deplete ourselves, stay up late, get drunk and high and all these things, and then sleep through half of the day. And then come Monday, there's such a drop that most of the week sucks, and then we want to do it again for the weekend. But even outside of that, just from like a quality of sleep perspective, waking up at the same time every day is important. The second is to get morning sunlight, or at least use what would be called like a happy lamp. There's a bunch of different names for them, but I will put a link in the description of the happy light that I have. I use that when needed, but if possible, just getting outside is ideal. When we get outside, this morning sunlight tells our body it's time to wake up, tells our body that it's time for the daytime hormones to take over. It's important, and a much different process that happens in the body when we get sunlight first thing, rather than looking at our phone, which is a very specific frequency of light. And you just have to kind of keep in mind, or if you don't know, like our bodies are so sensitive to light. Light largely governs a lot of what happens in our bodies and brains. So we've kind of lost the understanding of the importance of light in the modern world, again, largely because we just have light bulbs. We don't have to go outside. A lot of people don't go outside. But getting out in the morning, getting sunlight is telling our brains it's time to wake up. So it's very impactful or very helpful for energy levels, for regulating mood throughout the day, can help to fight off depression, anxiety, make us more resilient to stress. I would say even that adding, to get out in the morning light, it might be one thing. You can just go out and stand there for 5 minutes if that's all you can do, or even like 2 to 3 is better than nothing. But ideally, going for a morning walk is like in my opinion, maybe one of the best habits that a person can adopt, not just for better sleep, but for all around mood, mental health, energy, etc. But getting that morning exercise and getting the body going, getting enough light in our eyes and on our skin, if it's warm enough that we can have skin exposed, it's very important. It's free. It does take actually getting up, but it's a great way to start the day too. I think a lot of people have trouble getting out of bed because there's no real reason or anything to, drive them to do so. But if you can get up, get outside, go for a walk, put in a podcast or listen to some music or something that starts your day on, an upbeat foot, it just has such a powerful impact on the rest of your day. That's something that to me is very important. The next, which, this might fall in order before going outside, but is to hydrate with a glass of water and some sea salt in the morning and then throughout the day. So we want to rehydrate in the morning. We're usually mildly dehydrated when we wake up, and adding some sea salt to our water gives the body much needed minerals and has other effects on like stress hormones and things like that. So just having a glass of water with a pinch of sea salt, and then to kind of, while we're on the topic of hydration, just pull it through the rest of the day. Staying hydrated is very important for energy, for digestion, for mental clarity, all of these things. But also when we go to bed, there's a quote from, let me find it here, from the Sleep Foundation, that going to bed even mildly dehydrated can disrupt your sleep. So hydration throughout the day is really important. And what we don't want to do is just be pounding a bunch of water before bed, because you also don't want to be waking up to pee throughout the night, because that's not ideal either. So we want to just be taking in like a drip of water throughout the day, or, like sips of water throughout the day. So ideally getting about half of our body weight in ounces of water is a good measure. A pinch of sea salt in each glass is a good practice, or each, water bottle or whatever. But going into sleep and going into the evening, I mean, you can drink some water around sleep, but you just don't want to be trying to make up for not drinking water throughout the day right before bed. The next one would be being mindful of caffeine intake and timing. So there's maybe three things here that are important to keep in mind. Number one is that if you can wait about 90 minutes, it'll have an impact on your energy and mood throughout the rest of the day. The body goes through this natural, I can't explain it fully off the top of my head, but this natural process in the morning that when we drink caffeine, it ultimately inhibits that to a degree. So this is where walking comes in. Like it's a perfect substitute and a perfect thing to actually get us going. Like if you go for a morning walk, you're going to feel energized, and it's going to make it, not only because you're doing something, but because you have that natural energy boost, it's going to make it easier to wait 90 minutes. But it's really an unideal habit to wake up and just drink coffee right away. Like it's not, you're working against yourself, and it might be appealing in that moment and it might seem like it's good, but this is where you get crashes, early afternoon or late morning, and it just sets you up for like biological roller coaster, let's say, throughout the day, or you're working against yourself, let's put it that way. So that would be one thing, waiting 90 minutes. The second would be having caffeine with or after food. For most people, especially if you have challenges with your mental health, let's say, usually we're in a state of like excess stress biologically. So not necessarily that external situations are always overtly stressful, but just internally our system is stressed, and caffeine by itself can kind of worsen that, or it can hit us in a way that is has more of a negative impact than having it with food. So ideally we're drinking coffee with breakfast or after some food, a balanced meal, which we're going to touch on next, but having it with or after food. And then understanding the half-life of caffeine. So this is going to vary from person to person a little bit. There are genetic factors and factors with liver function, and I'm sure other things. But what we want to understand is that caffeine has, as a general rule of thumb, about a 6 to 8 hour half-life. So that means that if you have 120 milligrams of caffeine in like maybe a medium-sized cup of coffee or so, 6 to 8 hours later, half of that 60 milligrams are still active in your system. So especially for people who are sensitive or have sleep issues, you want to cut off caffeine as early as possible. And, even limit it a little bit throughout the day. It doesn't mean you can't drink it, but going half decaf, half regular at certain points, or especially later in the day, and especially just thinking like latest 3 o'clock, better 2 o'clock, maybe even ideal for some people noon, like no caffeine after that. And just knowing that even if you can fall asleep at night, and this ties back to the quality sleep, that even if you can fall asleep, it doesn't mean that your nervous system and your body and brain are getting into those deeper stages of sleep. If we're stimulated and we have caffeine, active in our system, it's going to inhibit that to at least some degree. So caffeine, it's a controversial thing. Some people think it's all bad. Some people think it's all good. I like to see it in the middle, and I think a lot of it depends on how we use it and the knowledge that we have on it. So take that for what it's worth, but I would encourage you to see that like if you have sleep problems and you're drinking coffee later in the day, I don't think there's any way to, there's nothing that you can really do to overcome the impact that caffeine is going to have if that's the case. I think that you really have to consider that the timing has to be pulled back. The next one is to keep blood sugar balanced throughout the day. And this goes, far beyond just sleep. I mean, they all do. All of these things are, any of these things that you do, they will lead you toward better sleep, but they're also going to help you throughout the day with mood, with energy levels, all of that stuff, because it is all interconnected. But blood sugar balance is another one that I think people don't really understand or haven't, been educated on. It has such a big impact on sleep and wakefulness. So to keep blood sugar balanced, we want to be eating regularly. There's other ways to go about this, but from the most basic sense, and what I think makes the most sense for a majority of people, is eating regularly, like small to medium-sized meals every couple of hours. So maybe every 2.5 to 3 hours. There's exceptions to this. There's digestive exceptions. There's reasons why some people might eat bigger meals or eat less frequently. But as a general rule of thumb, at least having a balanced meal or snack every 2 to 3 hours is a good idea. Balanced would be not carbohydrates on their own. Maybe you could make an argument for some people that like fruit or something that's a whole food by itself might be an exception. But ideally, we're having some protein, some fat, and some carbohydrate with each meal and snack. So this might be like some cheese and fruit. It might be, this is going to depend too. Like some people might be sensitive to dairy, but some nuts and fruit, yogurt, and like a tablespoon of honey, or like a decent granola. There's all kinds of different things, but for meals, like some proteins, whether you're getting that from a plant source, which I think is not always ideal for some people, but at times that might be, necessary or a practice. But some sort of protein. And then you have, I'll go into nutrition in a different episode, but a balanced meal, mainly not just eating carbohydrates and not just eating chips and things like that. And what this does is when our blood sugar gets wonky, if you're listening to this, you won't be able to see, but I'll try to describe what I'm doing. If we're eating just carbs, let's say we have like a donut, let's just use that as an example in the morning. What that does is spike our blood sugar up. And then as a result, our body produces insulin or releases insulin to bring it back down, which usually, I don't even know what word I was going to say, which usually leads to, or often leads to low blood sugar. And low blood sugar, the way our body counteracts that, if we don't then eat something again, is by releasing cortisol and adrenaline to bring it back up. And cortisol and adrenaline are our stress hormones. For a majority of people, especially if they're relying on carbohydrates mainly and like processed foods as their source of, nourishment, even though most of it isn't nourishing, it winds up looking like an up, like trying to describe this, spikes. What's a good way to, like mountains? It's just a peak and a valley, a peak and a valley, a peak and a valley. And when that happens, it's stressful on the body. What we want is more like a little wave that's not going up too much and not going down too much. And the way that we do that is by eating balanced meals regularly. And the reason why this is important for sleep is because blood sugar issues are often what prevent people from falling asleep at night. And that could be from having wonky blood sugar and too high a stress hormone throughout the day. And stress hormones can be affected by other things. That's why controlling what we can by choosing to eat balanced and well helps to mitigate that, because there's some things that may be outside of our control. So we eat regularly throughout the day. We eat balanced meals. I forget where I was going with that train of thought. Lessen our stress hormones throughout the day, or at least keep them, lower than they might be, keep them in check. It's the high stress hormones that often prevent us from going to sleep. That's where I was going. So either from not eating well throughout the day, or even not eating throughout the day. A lot of people will just skip breakfast, skip lunch, not eat all day, or eating like a big bowl of sugary cereal or something, something that's going to spike blood sugar around bedtime. And what that does is it often prevents people from being able to go to sleep. It prevents people from being able to stay asleep, often waking up at like 2 or after a couple hours, 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning. Like these can point to spikes throughout the night in adrenaline and cortisol that are what wake us up because of the imbalance in blood sugar throughout the day. So blood sugar balance, super important for sleep, also important for energy. Like eating regularly, eating balanced snacks regularly is very important. And I talk about this in a blog that I wrote recently, but I think it's just important to understand that food, and let's say as adults, we need to see that food is primarily nourishment and fuel first and pleasure second. So it's not that like food is enjoyable across the board no matter what. But when we approach food and what we put into our bodies, which for a lot of people is not actually food, but food-like products, which is lacking the nourishment, lacking, the nutrients. When we approach it from pleasure first, we invert the relationship to food, and it winds up that the thing that's supposed to sustain us and energize us and support us in, being well is actually something that works against us. So just thinking about that as a kind of rule of thumb side by side with the idea of blood sugar is to approach what you eat first from, is this nourishing me and is it giving me fuel that's going to last for hours, or am I doing something that's going to taste good and I will enjoy it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, but then I'm going to pay for it for the next few hours. I'm going to be groggy, my mood's going to drop. And if these things happen to you and you haven't connected that it's as a result of food, it is like for a majority of people, that is what kind of throws things off throughout the day. Yeah, food, very important. Nutrition, very important. Not something to go crazy over, but something that there's at least a baseline that we need to be focused on. The next one I would say is getting enough quality movement throughout the day. So the way that the reason that I specify this is that a lot of people think about movement and exercise as just like going to the gym for an hour or an hour and a half, a couple times a week. And that's good. Like, more intense, challenging exercise for most people is a good thing, but we really need to move throughout the day. Like sitting all day, if we wake up, we sit down to eat breakfast, we get in the car, sit on the way to work, we sit at work, then we sit on the way home, and then we go to the gym for an hour, and then we come home and we sit on the couch and sit to eat breakfast and then lay to sleep. Like that's not a healthy lifestyle. It just isn't. It is not an ideal way of incorporating movement into our lives. when I talk about getting enough movement and quality movement, this could be things like, if you are sitting a lot, getting up, maybe every 10 minutes, even if it's only for like 30 seconds, and doing 5 or 10 air squats or a few lunges or a few push-ups. If you're familiar with original strength, getting in some of the original strength resets. If you're not, that will be something that I talk about more in upcoming, either podcasts or blogs or videos or whatever. But getting in the resets, standing up and marching, left knee, right arm, right knee, left arm, doing these things helps to the cross crawl pattern, helps to merge or bring both hemispheres of the brain online, let's say, helps to turn down the amygdala where anxiety tends to be, or the part of the brain that, where anxiety is happening. So there's a lot of benefits to moving throughout the day for our mood, for our energy, but also the stagnation throughout the day often leads to poor sleep. Like, we're stressed throughout the day mentally, but we don't exert ourselves enough throughout the day to actually like get to the point where sleep just comes on, because we need it, like we do, but part of us isn't quite there, and it's a weird way that a lot of us live. So just moving throughout the day, I mean, you're going to be in better shape. You're going to, if you're throwing in push-ups and air squats and things like this, like pull-ups, if you work from home or something like that, just a few throughout the day, you're going to get stronger, you're going to build some muscle, like you're going to feel better, and it's going to help your sleep. And going back to walking, like walking in the morning, throwing in walks any other time. If you have a dog, take your dog for a walk. If you have a baby, walk with the baby, or just go out, with friends or by yourself and throw in some headphones. But walking, super important. Moving is super important. The intense exercise is also important, but it needs to be like, it should be ideally the supplement to the rest of our, food, let's say. Like the majority of our diet, movement wise, should just be moving throughout the day, moving around, and then adding in the more intense exercise. And again, it's bi-directional there, but enough movement throughout the day. Sleep benefit, mood benefit, energy benefit, digestion and absorbing our food benefit. Like, it's good all around, and just something that doesn't have to be super stressful. And if you don't go to the gym, like if that's not your thing and you aren't like into that, moving throughout the day can get you, most of the way there. Some people don't need that more like heavy, intense. It might not even be right at the place that they're at. But anyway, moving throughout the day, very important. The next one is keeping conscious clear throughout the day. I'm going to try to keep this one short because I've been rambling a little bit, but keep conscious clear throughout the day. Again, this is something that for better reasons is a good idea, but even in terms of sleep, we all kind of know how when you lay down to sleep at night, like all of the things that you didn't do that you wanted to do during the day, or did that you didn't feel good about, or said that you didn't feel, like all that stuff hits you when you try to slow down, and that keeps a lot of people up. And I'm not here to like give you advice on how you should live, but it's something to consider, that if you have trouble falling asleep or you have racing thoughts, looking at the day and really being aware throughout the day of like following through on things and keeping up with, what you want or feel like you need to be doing, being kind, whatever it is, all of the things that help to keep a conscience clear are important. Praying and meditating, I think that both of those, or either, again, not my place to say, which a person should do, but in the midst of the busyness of our world and like the constant going, I think it's another thing that is undervalued and really important, just taking that time. And can also, both prayer and meditation, it's, I mean, even ideally both, like you don't even have to label them as such, but even like praying in the sense of asking for good things to happen to people, asking for assistance in being the best that we can be and seeing our faults and being better and all those things. And, everything in between. There are better people to, like, for sure, not even better. Like, I'm not the person to teach you how to pray. And then meditation in the sense of sitting in silence. And you can do that in various ways, but just the power of silence, where silence is powerful. And it's something that, we lack severely in our day. And most of us have trouble even like going to the bathroom without sitting on our phones, or like doing something to distract ourselves. Like finding a minute without having something coming into our mind is like very challenging for most people. But the benefits of silence, I say this very much from experience. Like, had I not taken seriously the practice, now for many years, of prioritizing silence every day, sitting there, I don't know, like, I can't say how my life would be different, but it's something that's been so impactful in a positive way in my life. The next one, and we're getting, closer to bed now. I have two comments here. Actually, this is pretty much all falls into like an evening routine or a bedtime routine. So a couple of hours before bed, it's a pretty good idea to get off screens, TV, laptop, phone, etc. If you have to be on them, number one, I would say that what you're doing on them matters. Like watching something stressful or, adrenaline producing on TV is not a good idea around bedtime. That includes the news, that includes like crime shows and, other things that are like very common. So being mindful of what you're consuming there. And then if you have to work or do things, which, like that can be the case, prioritizing on, let's say on a laptop, having f.lux, which is something you can download. I know most computers, laptops nowadays have like night mode and things like that, but I think f.lux is more targeted and better. And you'll notice it if you use that, like how much different your screen looks. But that's a step. For the phone, same thing, night mode, but ideally having some sort of blue light blocking glasses, which you can get inexpensive. I'll put in the description again. Hopefully I remember this. Let me actually make a note for the brand of blue light glasses that I use. But they're fairly inexpensive and they're a good investment. And there's enough like data backing up and common sense backing up like the reasons to use them. But even if you can, like these are just computer glasses essentially. But if you work on a computer, using something that filters out some of the blue light throughout the day is not a bad idea, making it a little easier on your eyes. And your eyes are connected to your brain. Like whatever's going into your eyes is affecting your brain in some way. Making a note about the glasses. And just thinking about it from, we talked about morning sunlight and the importance of getting light in the morning. And it's the same thing in reverse at night, that for most of human history, we didn't have light bulbs and bright lights at night. We had sunset, which has, and is another place that if you can be outside, there are significant benefits to that frequency of light. The sun throughout the day goes through periods where, for instance, in the morning and the evening, the red, orange, and yellow hues and frequencies are stronger. And then midday, it's more blues and greens. Our bodies and brains respond to this. So even getting some evening sunlight has a specific like message, is giving information to our brain, to our body. But we for most of human history, we didn't have light bulbs. We didn't sit at night in front of TVs and things like that. It would be sunlight or like a fire or candles. And all of these things are higher in the red, yellow, orange frequencies, which are conducive to good sleep. A screen, on the other hand, is more like the midday sun. So when we're staring at screens at night, or when we're sitting in front of a TV, it's not to the exact same degree, I don't think, but we're essentially telling our brain, like, wake up, it's midday. And that happens. Like it affects our ability to produce melatonin, the sleep hormone. It has an effect on, our cortisol levels and things like that. So just being mindful of screens at night, wearing blue light blocking glasses, or at least seeing if you can get off the screens an hour or two before bed is ideal. And do something less stimulating, let your body wind down. What was I going to say with that? I just thought of one thing. Screens. Oh, all right. I'll add that to my list here. So then the next one would be to unplug your Wi-Fi. So obviously if you're on screens, you might have to wait until after, but just unplugging it overnight, you're giving your body a break from something that's foreign. I don't think anybody knows exactly the impact that it has, but there's enough out there to show that, in the same way that if you go out in nature, one of the reasons that it's relaxing is because there are what could be called native EMFs, native electromagnetic frequencies, ones that our body and our nervous system and all are accustomed to being around, that have a regulating effect, have a calming effect, kind of the same thing. But in the opposite way, something like Wi-Fi is something foreign. It's an entirely different frequency. It's one that has much more of a stimulating effect. So whether you believe, for some people, those are hard leaps to make and, kind of don't want to accept that, but just unplug the Wi-Fi overnight. Like you can plug it back in the morning. It's not, it's not like a huge time or energy investment to do so. And I think there's a significant upside to it. So these would be like things leading up to sleep. For a routine specifically, you have to think that like what's going to help with sleep is the more that we kind of transition our nervous system into parasympathetic, the rest, relax, digest, regenerate branch, versus the sympathetic, fight or flight or freeze, we're going to have an easier time falling asleep. We're going to sleep better. So simple things like stretching, foam rolling, trigger pointing, if you're familiar, just things that kind of help to bring us into our body, breathing while we do these things, like, just simple stuff, even 5 to 10 minutes can just help to downregulate the nervous system and prepare us for sleep. There's obviously other benefits too. And if you maybe have injuries and things like that, I think there can be some benefits to tending to them before sleep and allowing the body to kind of, get in there while you sleep or target them while sleeping. Although I don't know if that would exactly, it would probably apply to stretching and things like that. I know for ice and, arnica cream and things like that can be good before bed for that reason. But regardless, it's going to help you relax. It's going to help you prepare your body and brain for sleep. And I think that it can be good to pair something like that with either reading or listening to something that's like centering and peaceful, something spiritual, something that brings you peace of mind, reminds you that, there's more than just what meets the eye, and that there's more than just whatever stresses, you're carrying with you from the day and into, worrying about tomorrow and things like that. So preparing your body and brain in that way. As a general, to think about timing of sleep, there's exceptions to this again, but I think ideally getting to sleep before 10:30 is optimal. And that can be hard for some people, but those earlier, before midnight hours of sleep are really important. And, if you miss that some days, that's fine. But as a general rule of thumb, I think the quality and quantity and restorative nature of sleep is going to be all best if we're getting to bed earlier. So trying to be asleep by like 10:30, 11, much better than falling asleep at 12:30, even if you're getting to sleep until 8:30 and still getting like 8 hours. But I think for most people, again, there are exceptions, but I think they're few and far between, and most people like maybe think that they don't need as much sleep, but life points to otherwise. Even if you're not tired, like it can manifest, or the need for more sleep can manifest as anxiety and various different things. But 7.5 to 9 hours of sleep, I think, is an ideal rule of thumb for most people, trying to get to bed by 10:30. And then there is a lot of people think that eating before bed is not good. And again, in some cases that might be true, but I think for most people, especially if you're struggling with, mental health types of issues and you have a lot of stress throughout the day, a bedtime snack can be really helpful. And especially if you notice yourself waking up to pee a lot, or you wake up, like I was talking about before, at like the 2 a.m., 4 a.m., or just throughout the night, having a balanced snack before bed can be really good. And it's something that, like, without question, had a positive impact on my sleep and, as a result, like my daily life. But for a long time, I didn't eat before bed for that reason. I, fit myself more into like intermittent fasting and tried to stop eating earlier. And as soon as I started putting in a bedtime snack, I stopped waking up to pee a lot during the night. I slept deeper. I woke up feeling more rested. I fell asleep more easily. But the big thing here, and this is something that when I was a kid, that like nobody, the sleep professionals that I was seeing, nobody even asked this stuff, which is like, this is kind of what I mean when we try to solve problems without solving the problem. Is like, when I was a kid, I used to eat multiple bowls of cereal every night before I'd go to bed, which is like, that's just what you do if you want to not fall asleep or like not have restful sleep. Eat something that's going to, again, mess with your blood sugar and potentially like irritate your gut. Those are sort of the two principles there for really food at any time, but let's just talk about at bedtime. Eating something that's easy on digestion and something that will help to balance your blood sugar. So again, balance. There's a, let me make a note of this as well. There's a Dr. Leslie Korn who does a lot of like holistic mental health and healing kinds of stuff. And she has a recipe for like a bedtime smoothie, a relaxing bedtime smoothie, that I'll put a link in. I don't personally use that, but it could be a good place to start. But generally for me, I'll have like, sometimes it's just a glass of raw milk and honey, a tablespoon of honey, or teaspoon of honey. Or like my wife will make these oat flour, peanut butter, banana muffins. I might eat one of those with like a little bit of milk, but just something small, something fairly simple, is a good place to start. You can dial in further, like glycine can be good. So having like bone broth or a little collagen in something that you eat can be helpful because of the relaxing effect of glycine. Like there's more targeted things, but as a place to start, a snack that's balanced, cheese and nuts, or I mean, cheese and fruit, some nuts and fruit, something like that is a good place to start. And then as a kind of stack of supplemental, things that you can try, and this is not medical advice, and these are not by any means, and this isn't an exhaustive list of the natural things that are out there to try, just things that I find to be helpful or have found to be helpful for me and for people that I've worked with. Is number one, spraying magnesium on your feet before going to bed. So let me make a note to put magnesium spray. So magnesium spray, magnesium, the bottom of the feet are very absorbent. So spraying magnesium on them, it gets absorbed well. This is especially like nice in the winter when it's cooler, where you can put socks on over your feet and that's going to warm them up, and like they'll, the pores will open slightly. You absorb it even better. But magnesium is nicknamed nature's Xanax, and it's that way for a reason, because it can have a very calming effect. And for most people in general, but even to specify more, most people are struggling with mental health, addiction, poor eating habits, energy, things like that. Magnesium is very important. Most people are like, it's estimated that at least 90% of people are deficient in magnesium, maybe more than that. So I would assume that that applies to you. So a spray can be good for those reasons, but also it can help to relax you before bed and to sleep more deeply. So magnesium spray on the feet, I would personally try that. Like anybody who just wants to sleep better, even if you don't have terrible sleep issues. But it's a good place to start for something that can be relaxing. And then a couple of other things. Taurine can be helpful. The supplement taurine, I'm only going to give you like the rough dose or amount that I might take. Taurine is an amino acid, so you get it when you eat meat and things like that, but you can take it in a slightly higher amount in like a capsule form, somewhere between 500 milligrams and 2,000 milligrams. I would always start lower and work your way up. Do more research. Don't take like what I'm saying as, the only place to start. But taurine can be good, and L-theanine can be good. L-theanine is something that you would get in green tea, like alongside caffeine, but L-theanine has a relaxing effect. But that is something that can very much help with relaxation and sleep as well. And then you can also try supplementing with like a magnesium, like a capsule or a powdered form of magnesium, usually glycinate. Magnesium glycinate is the form of magnesium that I think tends to be most ideal for relaxation. So magnesium spray on the feet, a taurine. I would only do one of these at a time, so you know which one's working. If you feel like one, like there's always the possibility that something has like a reverse effect or just doesn't really help in that case. So I would try them one at a time if you were going to. Again, check with the doctor and whoever else before doing it. I'm just sharing things that have been helpful for me. L-theanine and magnesium glycinate, but I would start with magnesium on the feet. And if you're going to try any capsules, you can also have like a cup of chamomile tea and put the, taurine or something in there. That can be a really good way to wind down. Like the teas that are out there can be really helpful. And this is the thing where if you're doing this stuff throughout the day, like if you're working throughout the day to better your habits and make your lifestyle more optimal and conducive to sleep, you don't need something crazy at bedtime. Like people shy away from the teas because they don't like, chamomile tea or like a sleepy time tea or something like that, because we don't think that this natural stuff is powerful enough. But we shouldn't need anything more than that. I mean, chamomile is good anyway. Like even if, again, I don't think there's any reason not to just have it around sleep. It's going to help improve it. But, just a small combination of these things can be really helpful. So you can try a tea, a small balanced snack. You could even try, if you really don't feel like you want to eat something, a cup of chamomile tea with something added to it if you want, like a taurine supplement, and like a teaspoon of honey in there. That might be enough for some people to help balance blood sugar. And then let's say actually getting in bed. Ideally, you're keeping the bed reserved primarily for sleep, like not sitting in bed watching TV or watching YouTube videos and things throughout the day. Like the body and brain should associate the bed with like bedtime. So you might read before sleep. That would be, I think it's often helpful for people to help fall asleep. And then temperature of the room can make a big difference. Like somewhere around, I think 68 would be considered like the ideal temperature, but somewhere around like 65 to 72 is probably better than, or like the ideal range. But temperature can have a big or a positive impact. The first thing that I do when I work with somebody, like, I do kettlebell training, and original strength, which I talked about a little bit earlier, to kind of help support people alongside the nutrition and lifestyle stuff that I do. This is with like in the practice that I work at. The first thing that I work with people on is breathing, diaphragmatic breathing, proper breathing. And I have other YouTube videos. I will make a note to link those as well, on breathing and how to reestablish good breathing. If you haven't relearned to breathe as an adult, you're probably not breathing right. And I will tell you, like, for sure, my strong conviction is that, well, it's a biological fact, really, or a physiological fact, that when we're not breathing right, it affects our mind, it affects our physical health, things like that. So learning to breathe, relearning to breathe properly with our diaphragm is really important. But I have people, when they get in bed at night, take 10 relaxed diaphragmatic breaths. No strings attached. The point isn't to like fall asleep by the end of the 10. It's just to get in, to bring on some relaxation, to get out of the head for a minute, and also to practice that skill of breathing. And then I would say that, and this kind of comes from CBT. I forget what the like CBT's cognitive behavioral therapy, but there's some interesting and useful things in like CBT's sleep focused form, whatever you would call it, like the part of it focused on sleep. And I think that an important one, or just like a low hanging one, is to not get in bed trying to go to sleep. Just let it be a time to relax. So instead of closing your eyes or turning off the light and be like, okay, it's time to go to sleep, just say, this is a time for me to relax and enjoy this like quiet time in bed. That's much more conducive to actually falling asleep and relaxing into sleep than being like, all right, like I got to go to sleep. Am I relaxed enough? Am I thinking too much? Like, oh, it's been a little bit now. Is it getting too late? Like, just take that time as time for you to be with yourself and relax. And, this connects back to everything else throughout the day, but in particular, like the keeping the conscience clear, that it's a time that can be peaceful and, harmonious. Yeah. And then like, if you can't sleep, get up for a minute. If you can't sleep, if it's been, a while, have another light snack. It's not always, it's a lot of it's trial and error, but sometimes that helps. Or get up and sit in a chair and read for a few minutes and wait till your body tells you to go back to bed. Sometimes it can be helpful not to just lay there for too long. And if you wake up throughout the night, this should correct as, blood sugar is managed and stress is managed throughout the day. But if you wake up in the middle of the night and feel wide awake or have trouble going back to sleep, have a snack then. A lot of times when we wake up, it's adrenaline and cortisol. It's that increase there that wakes us and then makes us feel like, well, why am I awake right now? It's like 2:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning. Having something, a light snack can help to bring that back down, like help to lower those stress hormones and allow us to get back to sleep. So there's a lot in here. This was a lot longer than I intended it to be, but hopefully what we've talked about is useful. This is certainly not an exhaustive, list of things that one can do to improve and optimize sleep, but most of the things here are practical. Most of the things here can be done no matter your, like knowledge or resources. And I'm trying to think if I have anything else to add. I have a resource on my website for, I guess it would be called high mileage foods for mental health, but on the site it's listed as the right food can be medicine for the mind. But anyway, it's a free guide with the foods that are most important to be eating regularly to supply the nutrients that are necessary for mental health, to be able for the body to manufacture what it needs to feel content, to feel a sense of well-being, to feel happy. but that also will help with sleep. It also helps with energy. So that kind of stuff is super important. And, nutrition definitely plays a role in sleep too. Like sleep is a process where we're repairing and regenerating and all this stuff. And it does require resources, to do all of this, or for the body and brain to do that. So I have that there. I also have on my site a free 30-minute consultation, free 30-minute call if you feel like you're in need of more guidance in optimizing your nutrition and lifestyle, whether it's for sleep, whether you are struggling with anxiety and feelings of depression, whether you feel like your health isn't where you want it to be. You can schedule a free 30-minute call there. We can talk about it further, kind of get an idea of where you're at and what might be helpful. And last but not least, if you haven't listened to the previous podcast episodes, there's some hopefully useful stuff in there, some useful interviews, and I have a lot more coming, God willing. So I appreciate your time and attention, and hope this was useful for you, and I'll talk to you in the next episode. All right, thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and head over to risingstronger.com. You can join my growing email list by entering your email address or downloading my free guide, the High Mileage Foods for Better Mental Health Guide. I do offer a free 30-minute coaching consultation. You can sign up for that there as well. And again, I appreciate your time. I'll see you in the next episode.